Today I am joined by the very own Robert Kornovich, and we are going to talk about a topic that is very hot in the market right now. And that is, what is a realistic timeline for any digital transformation project? Lately, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, lately during any shortlist presentation or any conversation with a client, I feel like every year they ask us how we can do a readiness assessment in a shorter time frame. And it's like it's the same amount of work, right, for us, but how do we do it quicker? And do we have the resources to do it quicker? So I'm very excited about this topic today. If you are joining us, please let us know where you're joining from in the chat box. We love to hear from you guys, and please keep this interactive. We want to hear what your questions are, what thoughts you have, because this is a platform for us to educate you guys. So excited to be here. Robert, that was a long-winded introduction. Do you have anything to say before we dive right into this?
I do. Good morning, everyone. And this is a great topic because it's not actually the technology that's going to be limiting your timeline or dictating your timeline. And we'll dive into this in a little bit. Just to give like a high level taste of where this conversation's going to go. Change management is probably your biggest component. And that's probably what is going to be the biggest factor with the client. And in fact, I'll just dive right into that. So,
Yeah.
we're brought in early on to take a look at what you have, see if you, ideally, we're brought in at the point where we can look at your existing system and determine can it be re-leveraged or do you need to replace? But either of those have an aspect of change management, but nowhere near the momentous task of change management that comes with implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So the first couple of phases that we're usually brought in for, whether it's an IT strategic plan, we're just going to do requirements definition, or you have us do selection. There's change management there and there's education, but it's not to a great degree. Those I think we can compress as quickly as the client wants to go. And some clients are, they call us and say, hey, contract signed, let's start today. I'd like to have an RFP on the street in 30 days or
Yeah.
less. No problem. That can be done. Um, it's later when we start talking about implementation that we have to start taking into consideration not only staff's availability to do an 18-month implementation. Do we need to shrink it to 12 months? I'm working with a client today that 14 months was optimal, not because they wanted to take 14 months to do financials, but because of their busy season with budgeting and financial statements. They had to stagger it that way. But what comes into play in that, again, is the change management aspect. And so when you're doing something over a longer period of time, whether it's a 9 month or 12-month or 15-month implementation, that's a lot of enthusiasm that you have to keep going with your end users and get them involved. We'll go into that in a little more detail. But right now, I really think that's the delineation. It used to be takes a while to get through contracting, and then it takes a while to get the stakeholders available, and then it takes a while to get everyone scheduled so you can do discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, that can be done quicker, or in a lot of cases, with the tools that we have, we can shortcut that by putting together a good set of requirements right up front and then just vetting it with your staff, helping to focus on the type of software that you're looking for in terms of the categories that large ERP, medium-sized ERP, smaller company. We can get to those decisions a heck of a lot quicker now than we could 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made some good points. I do think change management is a key aspect of any implementation, right? But I also think what clients have to realize is the level of involvement that they want from us. That's been a big key determining factor, right? When we price for implementation, sometimes we give three different options, right? Do you want the Cadillac version where we are full PMO and managing the whole thing? Do you want a hybrid, or do you want more of like an IV&V, just complete oversight, right? And so when you guys are thinking about implementation of an ERP software, you need to understand the differences of the levels of the consultancy that's overseeing the project. So what are your thoughts on that, Robert? I think there's a big misconception in the market of, how involved we can be versus, how not involved we can be, and we can just be this oversight partner. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a lot of times clients don't actually know what they're going to need for implementation, and we're pretty honest with folks as well. You're not going to know exactly what you're going to need until you've selected and you've done contract negotiation. You can also, when you have your short list and you have your 2 or 3 finalists, you can probably get a pretty good indication then if we take the time to do that and really research that. But when you're 4 or 5 months away from that short list, it's
Hmm.
very difficult for the client to go, well, this is exactly what I want. This is what I'm looking for with Avero. The baseline that they have to have with us is we're the ones taking you through discovery. We're taking you through selection. We're taking you through contract negotiations. We're taking you through requirements, definitions. I know what you need. I spent time with you as a client, so when we start going into implementation, it's a lot easier for us to marry our experience with our understanding with a client and hold the software vendors accountable, which is
Hmm.
the shortcut to what a lot of this is. It's you're going to spend a lot of money with a software company, much more than you're going to spend with us,
That's right.
on a system that has a lot of liability, that has a lot of political capital implications, has a lot of legacy implications for a lot of people. And you're placing a majority of the risk with this software vendor and this implementer. Um, Someone has to be there to keep them on track every day to go, oh, okay, they want to tell us that you're going to need more money in this particular area because you need to delay go live by a month. That may be true, but I need them to prove to me where their cost suddenly means $300,000 just to delay go live for a month. And the software vendors, again, I beat up on software vendors quite a bit, but again, their path is of least resistance. They just want to get their resources on the project, churn and burn, get it implemented, and then move on to the next client. That's how they make their money.
Hmm.
So delays, they like to automatically talk about costs, which is not an unreasonable thing to do, but it needs to be a fair cost, and it can't just be, throw a number out there like $300,000 just to delay a go live. And again,
Right.
I always go back to shared fate. I like sharing the fate of my clients.
That's
I'm
right.
there to make the client successful. If the client's not successful, then Avero is not successful, and it doesn't matter. So then I have to be truly invested in their particular fate. Software companies don't necessarily share that same fate as well. They're concerned with protecting their liability and their
Mhm.
financial situation, which again is a normal part of being business. But in our case specifically, I'm there to be your advocate. I'm there to make sure that what you're paying for gets delivered properly, that there are no surprises, and that you come out with the goal you were looking for from the very beginning. I don't want to retire from this organization until I leave it in much better shape than it was on this existing system. Things like that. My
Right.
goal is to help protect all those goals with you as well as the financial and the liability aspects.
Yep, yep. No, you make a great point, and I love that you brought up our vendor friends. We really we're not trying to throw you guys under the bus. We love you guys. We love the relationships that we've built with you all. I think one of the biggest challenges we have when we're talking about implementation is, especially if we're responding to an RFP or trying to build out a scope of work before we've even been, on site with the client until we really know. One of the biggest misconceptions is, um, implementation in terms of what it's going to take resource wise, because we haven't even gotten to that point yet. They don't know which vendor they're going to choose. And we have to include caveats in our budgets and timelines that say, hey, this all depends on what the vendor is going to do, right? And can you walk us through that, Robert, and why that's so important and why we can't just, we can make assumptions, but it's hard to do. Um, so talk about that. Talk about knowing what the vendor's going to do and why that's important when building out a timeline or a budget for implementation.
Yeah, so and what I spoke of earlier truly is the baseline of what
Mhm.
you need. So there are other things on top of it, as well as in some cases we're doing augmentation. We're also helping them button up their support on their current system because again, you're just because you're going to a new ERP system, you have to live with your existing one for at least another year once you make that
Mhm.
decision to go to the new one, and
Right.
sometimes even longer. And then you got to figure out data conversion, which is another area that we know pretty well what the vendors are going to offer, what price tag they're going to put in front of you, and so we head off those conversations as early as possible so that the client has a good aspect and understanding of what they need with data conversion. Otherwise, vendors are going to go, okay, if you need 10 years, we can do that. That's going to be $2.5 million to do that conversion. So A lot of things that a lot of people would think you wait for the vendor to do, you can do with us. Chart of account discussions, public records retention, those specifically what you're going to keep with your accounting data, the state of what that data is in. What are you going to do with that system once you convert to the new one? Are you going to keep the old system around for just data warehousing, or have it just available so that if there is some data that needs to be pulled there? It's almost like a security blanket. We've talked about this in other situations. People always think they need to bring over a lot more data than they actually do, but a lot of clients are always like, okay, I get it, we're not going to move it, we're not going to convert it and put it in the new system, but I need to know it's there, and I need to know that if the state comes and says, I need to see the contract on this teacher from 27 years ago, I'm going to be able to produce that some way, somehow, either in the old system or because the data in the old system is being stored and maintained someplace so that I can get that. So there's a lot of aspects that we know of, especially with contract negotiations now. We know vendors are going to push back very hard about their liability, and they're going to want to write the contract so that there almost is no liability by the software vendor.
Right.
And again, that's a normal part of doing business with folks, but that's also the area that's been the biggest sticking point in our last couple of negotiations. Price was secondary. The fact that the software vendor and the implementer they were working with, the one they had selected, seemed to be going, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm just going to delineate your liability from mine, and I'm going to make sure I'm protected. And I think legal departments mean to do that at software vendors. I don't think sales, support, and implementation means that, but that's how it comes across to the client in negotiations. So understanding the perspective the client's going to start with, having those conversations with our client before we go into negotiations and let them know, are you solid on your liability? What do you think you can take to your board, and what can you not take to your board? And let's just lay out a baseline of where we're going to start on these contract negotiations and get a lot of that done. So even before we start planning out implementation, there's tons of things that we know the vendor's going to do and is going to want to do, and is not going to want to do, that we can start that conversation with the client early and get those answers.